Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtota Dashata Shri Srimad Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Is there a board? Okay. And what about, can you pass the book, please? I'll just wait till you bring the book. I guess maybe he's using the book. Can you bring that Achaman cup? Is there an Achaman cup there? Please. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Prescribed Duties for Mankind, Chapter 4, Hamsa Guya Prayers, Text 32. So if everybody could please repeat. Astiti, Nastiti, Cha, Vastu, Nishtayor, Eka, Stayor, Binna, Viruddha, Dharmanoho, Avikshitam, Kinchana, Yoga, Sankhyayoho, Samam, Param, Hi, Anukulam, Brihat, Tat. Okay. Astiti nastiti chavastu nishtayor Ekastayor binna viruddha dharmanoho. Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankyayo. Samam param hyanukulam brihattat. Astiti nasti ticha vastu nishtayor. Ekastayor binna viruddha dharmano. Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankyayo. Samam param hyanukulam brihattat. Astiti nasti ticha vastu nishtayor. Ekastayor binna viruddha dharmano. Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankyayo. How does the last line go?
Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankyayo. Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankyayo. Samam padam yanukulam brihattat. Samam padam yanukulam brihattat. Asti dinasti ticha vastu nishtayor. Ekastayor vinna viruddha dharmano. Avekshitam kinchana yoga sankyayo. Samam param yanukulam brihattat.
We like to chant. Yeah. Asti, there is. Iti, thus. Na, not. Asti, there is. Iti, thus. Cha, and. Vastunishtayoho, professing knowledge of the ultimate cause. Ekastayoho, with one and the same subject matter. Establishing Brahman. Binna, demonstrating different. Viruddha dharmanoho, and opposing characteristics. Avekshitam, perceived. Kinchana, that something which. Yoga Sankhya, of mystic yoga and the Sankhya philosophy. Analysis of the ways of nature. Samam, the same. Param, transcendental. He, indeed, anukulam, dwelling place. Brihattat, that ultimate cause. Translation, commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. There are two parties, namely the theists and the atheists. The theist, who accepts the Supersoul, finds the spiritual cause through mystic yoga. The Sankhya, however, who merely analyzes the material elements, comes to a conclusion of impersonalism. It does not accept a supreme cause, whether Bhagavan, Paramatma, or even Brahman. Instead, he is preoccupied with this superfluous external activities of material nature. Ultimately, however, both parties demonstrate the absolute truth. because although they offer opposing statements, their object is the same ultimate cause. They are both approaching the same Supreme Brahman, to whom I offer my respectful obeisances. Purport. Actually, there are two sides to this argument. Some say that the Absolute has no form, nirakara, and others say that the Absolute has a form, sakara. Therefore, the word form is the common factor. Although some accept it, asti or astika, whereas others try to negate it, nasti or nastika. Since the devotee considers the word form, akara, the common factor for both, he offers his respectful obeisances to the form, although others may go on arguing about whether the Absolute has a form or not. In this verse, the word yoga sankhya yoho is very important. Yoga means bhakti yoga because yogis also accept the existence of the all-pervading Supreme Soul and try to see that Supreme Soul within their hearts. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 12:13:1, Dhyana vastita tadgatena manasa pashanti yam yoginaha. The devotee tries to come. Prabhupada would quote this verse often. The devotee tries to come directly in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whereas the yogi tries to find the Super Soul within the heart by meditation. Thus, both directly and indirectly, yoga means bhakti yoga. Sankhya, however, means physical study of the cosmic situation through speculative knowledge. This is generally known as jnana shastra. The Sankhites are attached to the impersonal Brahman, but the Absolute Truth is known in three ways: Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti Shabhyate. The Absolute Truth is one, but some accept him as impersonal Brahman, some as the Super Soul existing everywhere, and some as Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The central point is the Absolute Truth. Although the impersonalists and personalists fight with one another, they focus upon the same Parabrahman, the same Absolute Truth. In the Yoga Shastras, Krishna is described as follows: Krishnam Pashangambaram Ambujakshanam Chaturbhujam Shankyagada Yudayudam. Thus, the pleasing appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's bodily features, his limbs, and his dress are described. The Sankhya Shastra, however, denies the existence of the Lord's transcendental form. The Sankhya Shastra says that the Supreme Absolute Truth has no hands, no legs, and no name. Hyanama Rupa Gunapani Padam Achakshur Ashotram Ekam Avidityam Api Nama Rupadikam Nasti. The Vedic mantras say, Apani Pado Javano Grihita. The Supreme Lord has no legs and hands, but he can accept whatever is offered to him. Actually, such statements accept that the Supreme has hands and legs, but they deny that he has material hands and legs. This is why the Absolute is called the Prakrita. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has a Satchidananda Vigraha, a form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, not a material form. The Sankhites or jñānīs deny the material form. And the devotees also know very well that the Absolute Truth, Bhagavan, has no material form. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Nadir Adi Govinda Sarvakarna Karnam. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme controller. He has an eternal, blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, for he is the prime cause of all causes. The conception of the Absolute without hands and legs and the conception of the Absolute with hands and legs are apparently contradictory, but they both coincide with the same truth about the Supreme Absolute Person. Therefore, the word Vastu Nishtayoho, which is used herein, indicates that both yogis and Sankhites have faith in the reality, but are arguing about it from the different viewpoints of material and spiritual identities. Parabrahman or Brihat is the common point. The Sankhites and yogis are both situated in that same Brahman, but they differ because of different angles of vision. The directions given by the Bhakti Shastra points one in the perfect direction because the Supreme Personality of Godhead says in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktya mama bhajanati, only by devotional service am I to be known. The bhaktas know that the Supreme Person has no material form. whereas the jñānīs simply deny the material form. One should therefore take shelter of the bhakti-mārga, the path of devotion, then everything will be clear. Jñānīs concentrate on the Virat Rupa, the gigantic universal form of the Lord. This is a good system in the beginning for those who are extremely materialistic, but there's no need to think continuously of the Virat Rupa. When Arjuna was shown the Virat Rupa of Krishna, he saw it, but he did not want to see it perpetually. He therefore requested the Lord to return to his original form as two-armed Krishna. In conclusion, learned scholars find no contradictions in the devotee's concentration upon the spiritual form of the Lord. Ishvara Paramakrishna Satchidananda Vigraha. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya says that less intelligent non-devotees think that their conclusion is the ultimate. But because devotees are completely learned, they can understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal. Om Gyanadavarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshulan Meditam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Nakaridevachalam Punkam Langai Tekadim Yakripatamaham Vande Shri Gurundinitadanam Vancha Kapadribhashta Kripasindabevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Ramanamaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna. When Prabhupada was in India one time, there was a big gathering happening. He was there speaking at the gathering, and his disciples were there. And Prabhupada, he'd mentioned a famous Mayavadi, or a famous impersonalist. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, he is an impersonalist, but I know that secretly he is worshipping Radha Krishna. And Prabhupada was indicating that, yeah, he says he's a big Mayavadi, but actually he's secretly worshiping Radha Krishna. Means he's so attracted to them, although he's saying absolutes and personal. So much of the verse and purport today is dealing with personalism versus impersonalism. Of course, nowadays, much of the world population, or much of the people of the world, they may not be so concerned with this, that, oh, is God impersonal? Is God personal? Who cares? They just care about becoming famous, or having a lot of followers, or having a lot of finances. The 3 Fs, right? Finances, followers, fame. And it doesn't really matter. Anyways. So, it doesn't really matter how they become famous. It could be, a lot of the times they try to be as sinful as possible to achieve their aims. But anyways, there are some people who are interested in the absolute truth, and whether the absolute truth is impersonal or personal. And this is what's being mentioned in this particular verse and purport. There's a whole discussion about this. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was traveling from Mayapur to Jagannath Puri, he eventually made it there to Jagannath Puri, and he immediately went to see Lord Jagannath, the Jagannath temple there. He was by himself. The other devotees, Nityananda Prabhu and other devotees, were behind him. He went ahead. So he was there by himself, and as soon as he was going to see Lord Jagannath, he saw Lord Jagannath, and then he went into transcendental ecstasy, and he actually fainted on the ground. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, one person who is an impersonalist, he saw Lord Chaitanya faint, and he saw that the guards were going to, whatever, beat him or remove him. So he and his people, they picked up Lord Chaitanya and they brought him to his house, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house. In Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he was a learned scholar, so he understood that, okay, this person, he's experiencing ecstatic love of God. He understood by the symptoms that Lord Chaitanya was displaying. But then at one point at Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house, it was like Lord Chaitanya, he wasn't breathing. So he was worried, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, so he went and he got a cotton swab and he put it by his nose and it was moving so slightly. So Lord Chaitanya was. So then the devotees, they eventually arrive to Jagannath Puri, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, at one point he awakens from his transcendental state, or slumber, transcendental state, and of course chants Hari Hari, Hare Krishna. And then the devotees, Nityananda Prabhu and other devotees, they get to Jagannath Puri, and then they immediately they speak with some of the residents there, and they find out what happened, that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he fainted, and he was brought to the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So then they go to the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So then Gopinathacharya, who was a devotee of Lord Chaitanya and was living in Jagannath Puri, he also was there, and Gopinathacharya and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, they arranged, first of all, it was around noontime, so Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he told Lord Chaitanya and the other devotees, he said, you go take your noon bath at the ocean, right there. If anybody's been to Jagannath Puri, there's the ocean's right there, very nice. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bathed there. Haridas Thakur was brought there when he left his body. His body was brought there, and sacred place. So they went there to take their noon bath, and then they came back, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Gopinathacharya, they arranged that all the devotees had Jagannath Prasadam, this Prasadam from Lord Jagannath. And it said that there was all types of, you could say, opulent preparations, cakes and things made with condensed milk and so on. And Lord Chaitanya told Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, just said, I'll just take boiled vegetables. There's a particular Bengali word, but he said, I'll just take boiled vegetables. And he said, and Prabhupada explains that this Bengali word, boiled vegetables, it also, it's not just boiled vegetables, but there's some spices there, cumin, pepper, mustard seeds, but simple. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, I insist that you and all the devotees, that you have Lord Jagannath's prasadam as he had it. Means you should have the cakes and the milk, condensed milk preparations, you should have all of this. So Lord Chaitanya, they accepted. All the devotees accepted Jagannath prasadam. So then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he then arranges Lord Chaitanya a nice place to rest and to be situated in. And he goes and has his lunch with Gopinathacharya. And then when he gets back, he addresses Lord Chaitanya and he says, Namo Narayanaya Namaha, which means I offer my obeisances to Narayan. Right? Now, if you're a sannyasi within India, it's still, even now, people may come up to you, Om Namo Narayana, which means that oh, you've accepted the position of sannyas, that means you've realized your godhood. It means you realized your God. So this is an impersonalistic conception. So Lord Chaitanya, he responded, he said, Krishna matirastu, may you always remember Krishna. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya at the time, he realized that, okay, this person's a Vaishnava sannyasi. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted sannyas from Keshava Bharati, which is a Mayavad impersonalist school. And he looked, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya didn't know. But then he realized, oh, he's a Vaishnava. So, and then what happens is, knowing that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted sannyas from this Keshava Bharati line, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said that, first of all, they all retired and went to their place of rest. And then the next day, Gopinathacharya took Lord Chaitanya to see the early rising of Lord Jagannath. And then eventually they went to see Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya again. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had this fatherly affection for Lord Chaitanya because he was much older than him. And although he was much older than him, he still gave him the respect of a sannyasi. He was offering his obeisances and so on. But he was telling Lord Chaitanya that, I think you should accept sannyas in another line. And he was actually offering that somehow, because this line was second class. So he was saying that. So then, and there was this whole idea that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he wanted to educate Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He wanted to help him because he was thinking, this is a young sannyasi. He's 20, I think he was 21. But he was a young sannyasi. And generally people take sannyas when they're 50, or Prabhupada would sometimes describe it 75, 25 brahmacharya, 25 grihastha, 25 vanaprastha, 25 sannyasi, right? Years. So he was young, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says, I need to educate him, because if I don't educate him in Vedanta, he may break his sannyas principles. He may not have the strength of mind to be renounced. So that was his idea, to educate Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to help him. Not in a proud way, but he had affection for him. And Lord Chaitanya, he accepted that. He accepted this affection, and he accepted this proposal that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he could give me classes on Vedanta. So then Gopinathacharya, he started to explain how you don't know who this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is saying, I don't. What's the proof? And he was saying how the proof. But anyways, Gopinathacharya, he was saying that you can't understand because you do not have the mercy of God. You don't have the mercy of Krishna to understand. You're a speculator. Your heart is hard, and therefore you cannot understand. And then he quotes this verse, Atapite deva padam bhujam dvaya, which, my Lord, if one is favored even by a slight trace of mercy of your lotus feet, he can understand the greatness of your personality. But those who speculate in order to understand the Supreme are unable to know you, even though they continue to study the Vedas for many years. So a way that we could tell we're getting the mercy of Krishna is that we understand the importance of Krishna consciousness, or we understand Krishna to a degree. And what's the proof of understanding? The proof of understanding is that we transform our lives, that we change, that we engage in Krishna consciousness more and more and more and more. That's the proof. And that's symptomatic of having the mercy of Krishna. Without, we see many people aren't getting the mercy of Krishna exactly. Of course, everybody in some way or another is getting the mercy of Krishna, but they're not getting the mercy, the full mercy of Krishna that's available. So we could think of that in our lives. So then Gopinathacharya, he said that he starts quoting because it's mentioned in the scriptures. Now this is, some people say, oh, well, if there's a society that accepts scriptures or the Vedas as evidence of truth, then you could quote that because it's accepted. This is a source of truth. This is the source of truth. So you could quote that. Just like Prabhupada would sometimes use logic and reason and mention other philosophers and so on, because that's what people accept as authorities. So here, Gopinathacharya is saying that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is mentioned in Vedic scripture. And even just from a mundane point of view, just the fact that he's mentioned in Vedic scripture, even if you say it's 2,000 years old or 1,500 years ago, even if you say it's 1,000 years old, for him to be mentioned in Vedic scripture, predictions of him, it's quite, impressive. So he mentions a few verses. Krishna Varnam Tasha Krishna, those who are intelligent, they engage in worshiping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna, means not blackish, but golden. Anyways, there's some Bhagavatam verses and so on, mentioning Krishna's, or Lord Chaitanya appearing. Now, of course, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he cannot understand this, so he doesn't accept it. So then, Lord Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he starts speaking to Lord Chaitanya. Specifically, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is teaching him Vedanta. And then it says Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was there listening to him for 7 days, and he wasn't saying anything. It's like sometimes you give a class and no one asks any questions, and you wonder, oh, well, did they agree? Did they not agree? What do they think, right? So Lord Chaitanya, he wasn't saying anything. So then, after 7 days, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he said, well, are you understanding? You're not saying anything. And Lord Chaitanya says, I understand what you're saying, but you are misinterpreting this. Of course, he was very humble, and much of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's preaching or educating Krishna consciousness was very humble. Not at all. But he's saying that your interpretation, the Vedanta's like the sun, very clear, right? But your interpretation is like a cloud covering the sun. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he says, all right, well, then you tell me what you think further. So then Lord Chaitanya starts to explain the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full with all opulences. You are trying to explain him as impersonal and formless. So this is what he's saying to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And he's saying that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Satchidananda Vigraha. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. Form of eternality, knowledge, and bliss. This means that he originally has three potencies. The pleasure potency, the potency of eternality, and the potency of knowledge. Together these are called the Chit potency, and they are present and full in the Supreme Lord. For the living entities who are part and parcel of the Lord, the pleasure potency in the material world is sometimes displeasing and sometimes mixed. This is not the case with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because he is not under the influence of the material energy or the modes. So he's saying that there's a difference between us and God. And personalists saying there's no difference. I mean, right now there's a difference because we're all an illusion. That's what they say. But when you become realized, there is no difference. And ultimately, there is no difference. But Lord Chaitanya said there is a difference. And the difference is that Krishna, God, he never becomes under the modes of material nature. He never suffers. Whereas the living entities do. That's the difference. That's what he's saying. So then he goes on to explain. I mean, there's a lot he's explaining, and we're not going to cover it all. But he says that the Supreme Lord enjoys 6 kinds of opulences. You do not accept this spiritual potency, and this is due to your great impudence. The Lord is the master of the potencies, and the living entity is the servant of them. That is the difference between the Lord and the living entity. However, you declare that the Lord and the living entities are one and the same. So Krishna, he's not under the laws of the material laws of nature. He's not a servant of material nature, whereas the living entities are. So they fall into Maya. Krishna doesn't fall into Maya. So he continues, one who does not accept the form of the Lord is certainly agnostic. Such a person should be neither seen nor touched. Indeed, he is subject to be punished by Yamaraj. Okay, pass the mic.
Agnostic?
Yes.
Prabhupada drew that from the word Gnostic,
Yeah.
the Bengali Gnostic, which is atheistic.
Yes.
Agnostic is not an
Not
atheist.
sure. Yeah.
So that should be, whenever you see agnostic, it should be atheist and or atheistic, depending on whether it's a verb or an adjective or a noun.
Okay. Thank you. So here's a plug for the Buddhists. Please excuse me, but this is Lord Chaitanya. He's saying, the Buddhists do not recognize the authority of the Vedas, therefore they are considered atheists. However, those who have taken shelter of the Vedic scriptures yet preach atheism in accordance with the Mayavad philosophy are certainly more dangerous than the Buddhists. Because not only is it's interesting because it's like they're preaching from the Vedas, but they're preaching atheism from the Vedas. So you're like really close to the absolute truth in one sense. This is 172, Madhya, chapter 6. Shankaracharya's theory states that the absolute truth is transformed. By accepting this theory, the Mayavad philosophers denigrate Srila Vyasadeva by accusing him of error. Thus they find fault in the Vedanta Sutra and interpret it to try to establish the theory of illusion. So Prabhupada explains in the purport, some of just excerpt from it. The supreme absolute truth is that from which everything is born. Similarly, in the Mundaka Upanishad it is stated, the Lord creates and destroys the cosmic manifestation as a spider creates a web and draws it back within itself. All of these sutras indicate the transformation of the Lord's energy, not of the Lord. There's no transformation. It's not that he has fallen into illusion or anything like that. It is not that the Lord undergoes direct transformation, which is called parinam-vad. However, being very anxious to protect Srila Vyasadeva from criticism, Shankaracharya became a pseudo-gentleman and put forward this theory of illusion, Vivartavad. Shankaracharya concocted this meaning of parinam-vad, and by word jugglery, he endeavored very hard to establish parinam-vad as Vivartavad. And of course, and it goes on to say, there's explanation, okay, well, who is Shankaracharya? Shankaracharya is Lord Shiva, and he's requested by Vishnu to come and, because at the particular time, there were followers of the Vedic scriptures, and they were performing animal sacrifices and just killing the animals for their own enjoyment, right? Common these days, right? But they were misrepresenting the Vedas, becoming violent. So So Krishna came as Buddha to stop this. And then some years later, quite some years, then Shankaracharya came. And when all of these people were following Buddha, he said, don't follow Buddha, you follow me. And of course he had that strong potency, it means Lord Shiva, right? So, and he was preaching this impersonalism. And he was, practically it's covered Buddhism, but they say we follow the Vedas, right? And he came up with these different theories, which are even now, today, available in the market. And then Lord Chaitanya, he goes on to explain the Atma-rama verse, Atma-rama Chamunayo, that those who are self-satisfied, unattracted by external material desires, are also attracted to the loving service of Krishna. Krishna, because he has transcendently attractive features. So, the examples are Shukadeva Goswami and the four Kumaras, who were Brahmavadis, means their conception of God was the absolute truth. They weren't Mayavadis, means they weren't, this is as far as their realization went. They weren't offending like, but the personality of Godhead, but this is as far as their realization went. Brahmavadi, Brahman, God's impersonal. So this is quoted, and Lord Chaitanya explains it in so many different ways. But it's an interesting verse because it's mentioning how even these liberated souls who had no attraction to material desires whatsoever, I mean, like there's not even a question, completely transcendental, right? Now, even they became attracted to, he came back and heard the Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami, and the four Kumaras, right, smelling the scent of the tulsi leaves on Lord Vishnu's feet, they became devotees. So that's being mentioned about the superiority of personalism. So then Lord Chaitanya, he convinces Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya becomes a devotee, a pure devotee. And he gets the love of God. And he goes into complete ecstasy. He's crying, he's falling on the ground, all these transformations happen. Lord Chaitanya embraces him, he's dancing, and all the devotees are amazed. Wow, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he became a devotee. And then it says the next day, Lord Chaitanya, he went to Jagannath the temple and he got some prasadam, and he came back and he came early to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house. It said Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was just waking up, and it said he took that prasadam. Didn't even think about it. He just immediately, without bathing and so on. And there's some verses quoted from Padma Purana. You should take prasadam immediately. Whether prasadam's coming from distant country, if it's stale, this and that, you should take it immediately to honor it. So he did that, which is he would never do before. And he was chanting Krishna, Krishna. So there's also in other words, there's all these, I have to bathe, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do so many things before I get to my spiritual practices, right? But he became a devotee, which means, there's Shastric references, anytime, any place, one could chant, one could, right, accept prasadam. So anyways, it was a big change for him. And it says that, that Lord Chaitanya, that immediately he composed these 100 verses, glorification of Lord Chaitanya. He was a great scholar. So then he had said that he composed 2 verses, specifically 2 verses. Says Mukunda Datta then copied the 2 verses on the wall outside the room. After this, Jagannatha took the palm leaf from Mukunda Datta and delivered it to Lord Chaitanya. So there was some verses Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya composed. And then as soon as Lord Chaitanya read the 2 verses, he immediately tore up the palm leaf. However, the devotees read these verses and kept them within their heart. So he tore it up because it was mentioning how he's God, and he didn't want that. He wanted to be seen as a servant of Krishna. So these are the verses. Vairagya vidya nija bhakti yoga shikshartam ekam purusha purana Shri Krishna Chaitanya sharira dari kripam buddhir yastit tamaham prapadye. And then we could end with these two verses. Let me take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, who is descended in the form of Lord Chaitanya, to teach us real knowledge, his devotional service, and detachment from whatever does not foster Krishna consciousness. He has ascended because he is an ocean of transcendental mercy. Let me surrender unto his lotus feet. Let my consciousness, this is the second one, kalam nashtam bhakti yogam nijam. Yeah, so let my consciousness, which is like a honeybee, take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has just now appeared as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach the ancient system of devotional service to himself. This system had almost been lost due to the influence of time. And it says, these two verses composed by Bhattacharya will always declare his name and fame as loudly as a pounding drum, for they become pearl necklaces around the neck of all devotees. So there's some other things where he wants to, Dayabhak, which is, Mukti Pade, anyways, he wants to, because it says in like, what is this verse? Te nukampam, What Prabhupada's translation? One who seeks your compassion, thus tolerates all kinds of adverse conditions due to the karma of his past deeds, who engages always in your devotional service with his mind, word, and body, and who always offers obeisances unto you, is certainly a bona fide candidate for becoming your unalloyed devotee. Bhakti Pade, he says. He changed it. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you can't change it. Because Mukti Pade, it's liberation, and now he's a devotee. He doesn't care about liberation. Yeah, so he went bhakti. So you could see the change. So this is the liberation of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And then at the end, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that. Let's see here. If one hears with faith and love these pastimes concerning Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's meeting with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he very soon is freed from the net of speculation and fruit of activity and attains the shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet. All right. So does anybody have any question or comment? Okay, Dravida Prabhu, then Rashika Shindu, and then Mukunda Prabhu.
Yeah, if you'll allow me, those 100 verses,
yes,
which are they're actually in the database. Unfortunately, there's some inaccuracies in the database. But there's one verse that I memorized that I think you'll all like, and you can all memorize it. Hare Krishna Rama Nama Gana Dana Karinim Shoka Moha Loba Tapa Sarva Vigna Nashinim Pada Padma Lubna Bhakta Vrinda Bhakti Dainim Gaura Murta Master Naumi Nama Sutta Dharinim. Now, to start at the end of the verse, Nama Sutta Dharinim means that he's carrying a knotted thread for chanting japa. I don't think they had the beads like we have so much. He would chant on a knotted thread. So he's alone. He was in a little garden and he's worshipping there, chanting his japa. So what he says is Hare Krishna Nama Namagana. Lord Chaitanya made a gift of the song of the Hare Krishna mantra for everybody. Hare Krishna Rama Nama Gana Dhanaka. And those who accept that gift, then they are freed from shoka, moha, lobha, tapa, sarva vigna nashinim. From lamentation, from illusion, from greed, from all negativities, they become purified of that. And the devotees, those of his devotees who are very greedy for the nectar of serving his lotus feet, he bestows the highest prema bhakti. I very quickly and eagerly offer my obeisances to that golden avatar Lord Chaitanya, who's chanting his japa in a secluded place on a string of beads, a string of knots.
Yeah, that's a great one.
But that first line is Hare Krishna Rama Nama Gana.
Hare Krishna Rama Gana Nama. You have something?
Prabhu, in the Bhagavad Gita, right, there is a distinction between impersonalists and the Mayavadis, right? So practically, are there on a practical day-to-day basis, are there any impersonalists still in who are practicing?
I mean, there's like, to be a strict impersonalist, I mean, like Prakashananda Saraswati, not Thakur, but Prakashananda Saraswati, because sometimes devotees say Prakashananda Saraswati Thakur, but not Thakur, Prakashananda Saraswati. So Prakashananda Saraswati, he's a real impersonalist. I mean, practically to be part of that group, one would have to take sannyas. You could see how popular that would be these days, right? Yeah. Well, all right, I'll get to that. But to really be there, one has to be sannyasi. So yeah, I mean, how much are they actually? How many real impersonalists are there? I mean, maybe some in India. Or much of the impersonal nowadays is, you could say, like neo-impersonalism, or just impersonalism in name only. So with the aim of becoming the supreme, so you could gratify your senses without any regret, without any sense of fear or whatever. Right? You don't got God there kind of checking, right, things. So now in terms of Brahmavadis, because Mayavadis and there's Mayavadis and there's Brahmavadis. So Mayavadi means Vadi is like a philosophy or a philosopher. Vad, philosophy. So they think that Krishna's form is Maya. Means they think it's illusion. Krishna's form. They think Mother Yashoda and Krishna, this whole pastime, it's just illusion. It's Whereas Brahmavadis, they're not so advanced, for lack of better. Means they're not so. The Mayavadis aren't advanced. Means they're not so advanced in their concepts of impersonalism. Means they're not so far down the road. So the Brahmavadis, they're just thinking that God is impersonal, and that's how I'm worshiping God. Like Shukadeva Goswami. It's not that Shukadeva Goswami was going around preaching how Krishna Lila and all these things is Maya. It's not that the Kumaras were going around preaching, oh, this is all Maya. But they were just Brahmavadis. I mean, they had the conception of Brahman as the absolute. But then they became personalists and became great devotees. So are these Brahmavadis around? Yeah. You could say neo-Brahmavadis? Yeah, sure. Where they are? I mean, there's a lot of people, actually. Much of religion these days are Brahmavadis. Means they accept God as the absolute truth to be impersonal. I mean, a lot of them. Main religions, I'm saying. World religions. So, they're still around. But Prabhupada, he came to America, the Western world, to dismantle these ideas. Brahmavadi and Mayavadi, just, get rid of them by education. To let people know that God is a person, the Supreme Absolute Truth is a person, not impersonal. Because impersonalism, it actually creates a lot of problems. Because it doesn't, So, yes. Yeah, you sure? Okay. He said he's fine now. All right, so any other?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Thank you.
I've been waiting for you to ask a question.
Thank you, Prabhu. My question is, Like in India, I see some in small town and villages, they say that, oh, I don't do anything bad and I'm doing good and I don't harm to other people and God is in my heart.
Sounds like a Southern California.
Yeah,
Yes.
Atma is Paramatma, and so that kind of people are not educated enough, or they haven't read, or they don't know. So they said, "Oh, as long as I'm not harming." Like I talk to my extended family members, and they say, "As long as I'm not harming anybody, and Atma is my Paramatma, soul is, so I'm helping people, and that's my puja and my seva." And so it's really hard, like...
Dhiridra Narayan, right? Yes, you
Yeah.
continue. Yeah.
So it's hard for... Like then I talk, but then they said, oh yeah, that's what they're understanding. They are innocent. They don't have any knowledge of impersonalists or any kind of these complicated things, but at the same time they don't. So I'm just asking
What to do? How to help them?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a point when innocence isn't really like an excuse anymore. Because innocent means that once being educated, then you make steps to change yourself. But if you're just say I'm innocent, and then somebody's trying to educate you, and one is you have no interest, and you don't take it seriously, and two, after so much education, you still don't change. It's like, how innocent are you? It's questionable. Means it's not innocent to ignore God, or to envy God, or to forget one's spiritual identity willingly. So, like for example, if I go up to someone and I say, you should stop eating meat, and I give them all the great reasons why to do it, mostly not for health, mostly for violent purposes, because that's the strongest, as was mentioned someday in class with Dharmaseta Prabhu. Now, I could say this person's innocent, right? Yeah, some ways they are, right? They're just in a bad situation, or they grew up like that, and another thing is why they grew up like that. But okay, sure. But upon me educating them, and then if they don't change, I mean, how innocent are they? I mean, people who change, that's a sign of, you could say, true innocence, or that's a sign of fortune. I mean, if you tell somebody and they say, you know what, that's a good idea. I shouldn't eat meat. And then they change it. So you have all these people, they say, oh, God's in my heart, and I just do good to people, and I don't harm anybody. But it's like, but that's not what life's about. Life's about reaching the highest gradually, shanai, step by step, the highest goal, which is Krishna prema, to love for Krishna. That's the goal. If you say, oh, I'm a good person and I don't hurt anybody, it's like, all right, well, you're actually cheating yourself.
Yes.
And this is, and like I said, the Southern California, they're exactly like this. Like you're, I know it sounds kind of funny to say the villagers of India and the Southern Californians have something in common, but they actually do. And you could say, maybe, nowadays, you could say maybe, or in most cases, maybe you could say, that, because degradation's happening very fast these days, but a lot of cases, the villagers of India, the small place of India, they're more pious.
Yes,
maybe you could argue
they
them
are following the four regs, he does a candle. He said, I do diva every day.
Yeah,
and
but
then I go
but
to
these
work and I don't.
these four regs, for example, it's not like there's some. These are human principles. And once a person follows human principles, there's a lot more than that. So people become lost in piety. People become lost in religiousness. But it's not about that. It's about loving Krishna. You could say, I follow the principles. Okay, well, great, very good. But what about loving God? What about loving Krishna? You have to chant Krishna's names. So how to help these people? I mean, they may not
Pray for them.
they may not attain some high state. By fortune, hopefully they associate with devotees, they get the right idea, and then they become devotees. But a lot of people, it doesn't happen like that. So
Yes,
we could just try. We give them Prabhupada's books, we give them prasadam, we lead a good example, and we just try our best. And then after that, what can we do? So
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes.
I gave them Bhagavatam from here, like in Gujarati, but over there the older people read, not younger. They don't have time. So I come home at 10:30 at night and go for bread and whatever work, and everybody's like that, so that we don't get time. And I said, one page, if you have time to just read one page a day or something. I try, but thank you so much.
This idea that you can live a pious life and you're not committing any sin, is negated by this whole idea. You had so many sins you're committing unknowingly. The whole thing, you light the fire in the stove, there's so many little insects get burned up, you're stepping on them and so forth. Plus, you pay taxes. Everyone pays some taxes, right? You're tangled in there, you put money in the bank. That money goes to, in America, they buy bombs with it, they bomb kids in Iraq or somewhere. In other words, you are entangled just by living here and just by walking on the street. So on the level of, negating that, you say, well, okay, fine. Now, if you really want to be safe, chant the holy name. That's what we've just been reading, the whole Ajamil passed him. He didn't know he was going to meet that in the forest. It was a hazard for him, and he got entangled by that. But luckily, the whole lesson is that inevitably, if you're not practicing bhakti and you're not worshiping the Lord and you're not chanting the holy name, you, especially this age, you are committing sin, even unknowingly, and you're entangled and you suffer. Therefore, even on that level, you should chant the holy name, and then they get open to bhakti by just chanting the holy name.
Yes, thank you.
That's a good one.
Okay.
Nice point.
Okay. So
Thank you so much.
last Neha, you could, and then we could end, and then Vijay Krishna Prabhu, you had a question from yesterday, but then you could have a question from today. So Amogalila could take the question from Friday and Saturday, and Sunday. You'll have three, Amogalila.
Of course, Prabhu, no problem.
I'm sorry. Yes.
What do followers of Lord Shiva, are they, what category do they fall in? In my extended family, in India, Sadhguru followers, they go to the ashrams, they spend time there serving
Yeah.
Lord Shiva.
Lord Shiva. Okay. So where do the followers of Shiva come in? Well, I mean, like Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that what is it? Alpamadasam, right? Means that it's not the most intelligent thing to worship the demigods as supreme, because much of people do. They worship the demigods as supreme, but so much of the Vedic literature is saying Krishna is the supreme, so why not just, go to Krishna? Because Krishna, he's empowering the demigods to give people what they want in the first place. Why not go to Krishna? Now, of course, to worship Shiva versus worshiping some Hollywood star, for example, of course, I mean, there's no comparison. Without a doubt, worship Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva is a pure devotee of Krishna, so there is some mercy there, you could say. But much of Shiva's worshippers, they want something from Shiva. Like one devotee, anyways, a story is told that he went to India and he saw somebody praying before the altar, right, to Ganesh, very intently, very seriously. And then the family members were there, and then he was impressed, and he went up to this family and he said, "What are you praying for?" He thought he was praying for, please purify my heart, and please remove all my, obstacles so I get closer to you, or, please give me love for you. He thought they were praying something like this. So then he went up to the family, "What are you praying for?" And then the family said, "Well, we're praying that our business, kind of." Now, that's pious in a sense. At least they're not just, selfish. They're not, means they're recognizing some higher power. But as Vaishnavas, we would say, better worship Lord Shiva as a pure devotee of Krishna, and then worship Krishna as supreme. Yeah. But again, it's good that they're in the Vedic fold. Yeah. So. Yes, you can actually. He has a place. Now, of course, what's the qualification for entering that place? I mean, I haven't fully done my research because, and are much of the followers of Shiva actually going to go to that place? Are they so Shiva conscious? Are they such pure devotees of Shiva? So, yeah. So does that?
I wasn't sure if it falls under Brahma.
Oh.
Because they also focus on like nothingness.
Yeah. Much of the followers of Shiva also, they tend to be impersonalists. Means they worship Shiva for different purposes, a lot of material purposes. But then they have some conception that, okay, absolute is impersonal, and they're worshiping impersonal, So you could say the Brahmavadis, or much of them, maybe Mayavadis. Because after all, Shankaracharya, the great teacher of impersonalism, he was Shiva after all. So there's obviously some connection, and then people get into Durga worship, and anyways, there's a lot of different worship people get into. In America and the Western world, people just worship their bodies and Hollywood stars and, material possessions and stuff like that. Where in India, they're worshiping, different gods. So sometimes it's questionable which one's harder to kind of break.
Prabhu, what about four sampradayas that we say that it's okay, it's within four sampradayas, Sri and Sambhu? And
those are Vaishnava sampradayas. Oh. So, Shiva is the head of one of those sampradayas, but there's Shiva, and then there's Lakshmi, and then there's the four Kumaras, and then there's Brahma, our sampradaya. So those are Vaishnava sampradayas. But all the other groups, typical religion, right?
so that doesn't mean it's Shiva Sampradaya, they worship Shiva and Sri Sampradaya.
No, it means he's the Acharya, and he teaches them, Krishna worship. It's not that they're worshiping him as supreme. It means he's the Acharya of that sampradaya. Just like Brahma is the first Acharya of our sampradaya, and it's not that Brahma is teaching us how to worship himself. It means he's teaching us how to worship Krishna. So same with Shiva. Same with all devotees of Krishna. They teach people how to worship Krishna as supreme, not themselves. Whereas the Mayavadis, of course, especially with these newer groups, they're really into teaching people how to worship the Supreme, and the Supreme happens to be them. And they happen to, get a lot of followers for whatever weird reason I still cannot understand. And they tend to get a lot of money, and they tend to get a lot of fame. Or in the Vaishnava world, they become infamous in the Vaishnava world. But in some other groups, they become famous. People worship them even after their demise. It's amazing. It's always been a real amazing thing to me. Like some guy says, there's so many of them popping up, mostly from India. Of course, in America, they're coming too, but some guy, I'm Shiva. It's like, no, you're not Shiva. You're a rascal. That's what you are. You're not Shiva. But they say, I'm Shiva, or somebody, I'm Krishna. It's like, no, you're not Krishna. And then they get caught in some, messing around with some, young girls. Just as sannyasis, they get caught messing around with some young girls, and the credit of South India, because South India is still, in many ways, a very traditional place in comparison to a lot of places in India. But the priests in South India, they practically kicked this person out of South India. I don't know what they're going to do to him, but they were upset because they're saying, first of all, he's saying I'm Shiva and all this other nonsense. But then, messing around, Hare Krishna. So, but to their credit, they told him, somehow or other they got him out of there. So, Hare Krishna. Anyways, so thank you very much. Grantaraj,
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. So tomorrow there'll be a class by Amogalila Prabhu. So, and he'll be answering 3 questions from Vijay Krishna.
Yes, I have a list.
So you might have to, somehow or other.
I wrote it down.
Hope you don't mind.
Thank you,
Amogalila.
Balaram Prabhu. You're very kind.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.